Yes, and we are live. I'm here with my new friend Jerry. How you doing?
Good. How are you, David?
Nice to meet you. I don't know if you probably haven't listened to my podcast before, but the way I like to do things here is a little bit different. I ask my guests to talk about themselves at first by going all the way back to childhood. So it's a big ask, but you could just sort of touch on the highlights. Who are you? What shaped your worldview? And if you have any faith or philosophy or religion that dominates today, how did you end up there? What was the childhood like? What was the home life like in terms of faith and philosophy? Just try to paint a picture in terms of worldview and how you see things.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm here primarily because I've written my first book, and this is my first podcast.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. And the book is called Grandpa's Adventures in the U.S. Navy, Soul Searching on the Way to Mars. And so it fits right in with my Catholic upbringing.
Oh. Oh.
I grew up in rural Wisconsin, went to school in this very small town of Elk Mound, population of less than 400 people.
Mm.
Attended St. Joseph's Parish Church there in Elk Mound. Had 100 families. And that's back when Catholics used to have a lot of kids. There were 3 families with more than 11 children. I was sort of average. My family was 7. I was the oldest of 7.
Mm.
So, of course, I have baptism, First Communion, uh, and all the rest. And the Catholic priest played a role as mentor for me because I decided when I was quite young that I wanted to be an astronaut. So the kid in the cornfield decided he wanted to go into space, but I didn't even know, I didn't have any college graduates in my family tree. The only college graduates I knew were teachers at school. I didn't even know a pilot, but I asked the librarian for books about space, and I became particularly interested in Mars. Then the first 7 Mercury astronauts came out with a book called We 7. And I read that book and took notes. I wanted to know, how do you become an astronaut? So the formula that I came out that book was first go to a service academy like Air Force or Naval Academy. Second, they all had master's degrees in aeronautics or something similar science. They were all distinguished fighter pilots, top fighter pilots in the Air Force or the Navy. And they all went to test pilot school. So as a 13-year-old in 1961, I set my goal to walk on Mars. I knew we'd be on Moon before long, but I wanted to be one of the first to walk on Mars. And so I decided to go into try to get an appointment to the Air Force Academy. A very tiny high school, total high school. I had 185 students. My class graduated 43. So I figured if I weren't number one in everything, there's no chance from that tiny school that I'd get into a service academy. And my priest, Father Crowley, helped me apply to the congressman for the Air Force Academy. But I did not do very well on the test. We lost our first basketball game the night before, early morning test, and I didn't get enough sleep. For whatever reason, I did not get the appointment. And so as a 17-year-old, it seems like forever. I've got to wait another year. Oh my God. So I'm a year behind my competitors already. So I went to the University of Wisconsin, Madison, which had the Naval ROTC program, and I intended to apply to the Air Force Academy after that. But they were pro-Navy, of course, and my counselor was a Navy pilot. And he said, I don't know what language I can use on your show, so I'll keep it clean, but he used a derogatory term about Air Force pilots. They've got a 12,000-foot runway to land on that never moves. The best pilots in the world are flying off aircraft carriers. So I took his sales pitch, hook, line, and sinker, and years later I'd regret it when I'm out in the middle of the ocean at night, nothing but a tiny little aircraft carrier bouncing around in the dark. It's my sole place to land, which sometimes then I was in the Air Force. So I didn't get into the Air Force Academy first time around. I got into the Naval Academy as a result of being an NRTC. Along the way, then the next one was to get a master's degree in aero, and I failed to get into school there the first time. And I talked my way in and got tossed out of class because I didn't maintain a 3.0. So the story, the book, Grandpa's Adventures in the U.S. Navy, is really this whole chain of events that took place over 20 years. And the Catholic faith is in the background and in the foreground. And at the very end of this story, it takes a very prominent place. So I didn't get into jets first time around, didn't get into become a fighter pilot, did not get a recommendation from the commanding officer I needed to get one. I had 16 failures along the way. So the book, to me, is written it for my grandchildren. And there's a note at the end of every chapter to my grandchildren about what they should learn, or lessons they could learn about life from that particular chapter. But there's also a lesson for any of us who set lofty goals. There's no such thing as jumping from A to Z. There's no overnight success. And it takes work, and along the way there'll be missteps, side steps, broken steps. In my case, 16 times I failed to get to the next place, but I kept my faith that eventually I would get there, and I did.
Amazing. An amazing story. Is your book actually out there where people can find it on Amazon and different book sellers?
It's being published by Amazon, and they said the release will be on Friday. But
Friday.
they haven't given me the final file yet, and I'm going to need a couple of days with it. So, but it's very close. The goal is to have it out before Christmas.
Wow. Well, you're going to send me an email with the links, and I'll add it to the show notes for this interview so people can click on the book and buy the book. That would be excellent. This is a tangential question. It's a silly question, but on the internet, there's kind of all kinds of conspiracy theories. Some people say we never landed on the moon. I just want you to talk about that from your perspective, because of your passion for what you're into with space and all that.
Yes, I met Neil Armstrong. I met Captain Lovell as well. They made presentations to the Naval Academy when I was there. And I have 4 classmates from the Naval Academy who are astronauts. One of them, one of my best friends. So yes, we did land on the moon, without a doubt. And there's probably any evidence, and there, of course, there are plans to go to the moon again, and establish a base there that would be practice for Mars. So,
how far away is the Mars conquest, in your opinion?
David, that's a great question. My whole life, it's been 10 years away. It's still 10 years away.
It's always 10 years away. Wow. Do you know any young up and coming future astronauts that are excited about Mars?
Only through YouTube, watching.
Okay.
Watching young people there, and the planning for the Mars trip and SpaceX and all that. So I do not know them personally, no.
Is it an international effort that's going to take place this time over against the nationalist efforts for the moon conquest? Is it going to be more of an international project, do you think, this time?
I believe so, just like the International Space Station was an effort of many, many countries. But there in the background is competition with China as well, and the concern that they will get there before us or accomplish something before us.
I worked for the Canadian Space Agency. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's in Saint-Hubert, Quebec. And I met a female astronaut, actually. She was training. I don't think she had at that time gone into orbit or anything. But I met a few male astronauts who had, and I can't remember the names, unfortunately. But I used to work out with them in the gym of the space agency. It's like a country club, It was like they had a beautiful restaurant inside, a nice gym for the astronauts and for the employees to work out at. And it was a really nice atmosphere. Did you experience that sort of I don't want to say a country club atmosphere, but, a lot of facilities that were provided to you in the Navy where they take care of you and sort of grooming you so that you're ready if you do end up becoming an astronaut? Were you treated well because of that?
Oh, absolutely. Every Navy pilot has to maintain the same physical requirements of an astronaut. And we got all
Okay.
the similar training to them, being dunked and dragged through the water, the ejection seat training. If you ever seen in the movie An Officer and a Gentleman, they show some of the same routines that we had to go through and same challenges. But yes, we're very well prepared for it. I wouldn't call it a country club atmosphere.
Well, because I was just you know, an employee working on the international. Well, there was an international project for a satellite system called Odin, and I was working on a small component as part of a physics team that I was studying physics, and so it was just it was a very comfortable lifestyle for us. You know, just the nerds who were working there doing the science. But I'm sure for the if there were military and astronauts there, I'm sure they were going through everything that you've described, all the hardship and the discipline and mastering the body. And it's funny because
And
St. Paul talks about that as being a model of how our spiritual life is supposed to be too, disciplined and always striving forward towards the goal. And you talked about falling short and picking yourself back up and moving towards the goal, and 16 hurdles and 16 times you get back up. And that's what St. Paul talks about with striving and keep moving towards the goal. And did you draw strength from your Christianity during all those falls?
yeah, yes, I wrote this book as a result, as a request of my children, because of the hundreds of stories I'd told them over the years. But one of them is right in line with this. One of the tests we had to do was to jump off a 10-meter board into the, 10-foot board, 3 meters. Jump in with a flight suit on, feet first, then reorient yourself and swim underwater to the end of an Olympic-sized pool. And as a child, I almost drowned. So I have PTSD around drowning and being held underwater. And I couldn't do it. I struggled and felt like my lungs were going to burst. So I failed the test. I was then put on what's called the substandard squad, and you got 4 weeks to do it. And you have to come every afternoon between 4 and 5 o'clock until you accomplish it. But you got 1 month to do it. So I failed 200 times. It came down to the last 5 minutes of the last day, and my career hung in the balance. And here comes my Catholic story. At the time, one of the top songs the Beatles were singing was Let It Be, about Mother Mary and Let It Be. So I figured God was too busy. I would ask Mother Mary to give me help. I never asked her for anything before. Maybe she could help me out. And I jumped into the water, started swimming, and I felt as if I had a little push, a little following sea that helped carry me to the end. And I jumped out of the pool at the end as if I were Olympic gold medal winner. Yay! Is
Wow.
that close to failing?
Wow. And so you felt more calm and peaceful during that last run?
Yes, and I felt as if I did physically have some help that I needed.
Wow. Wow. So since that time, I would imagine you have a special devotion to Our Lady.
Special thanks to her. I don't call on her very often.
Well, because you're not doing the the ordeals very often, I would imagine. Yeah. Is that the hardest ordeal you went through? That little story you told me, is that one of the hardest ordeals?
Oh no, I had dozens of times where I was close to getting killed. And my roommate got killed on the aircraft carrier. The book is not ghost stories, but I do talk to a couple of ghosts in the story of people who recently died. But anyway, my roommate was killed. In the middle of the night, he woke me up and he was dripping wet in his suit, in his flight suit on. Said, Jerry, I just want to let you know that I'm okay. I said, thank God you're still alive. Let's talk to you in the morning. When I woke up in the morning, I looked down in his bunk and there was nobody there. So I realized then that was his ghost that came to tell me that he was okay. But of course, that had an impact like it would to anybody. You lose your roommate. So the next time I approached night carrier landings, I had a really, really rough time. I went around 4 times and didn't get aboard and had to refuel 3 times. And I had nothing left. So among the pilots, this is any pilot when you have an instructor, you make sure you have positive handoff between the two. The co-pilot says to the pilot, "You have the aircraft," and he has to positively answer, "I have the aircraft." So I went to that routine with God. I I said, "I got nothing left. You've got the aircraft," and I imagine the voice saying, "I've got it," and flew into a perfect 3-wire landing. And I said, "Okay, I've got it back." So I taxied over to the position to stop.
Wow.
I really
Intense.
felt like I was going to die that night.
Wow. This is a very silly question, but have you ever literally crapped your pants out of fear as a young man?
No, but I have a section in one chapter called "Scared Shitless."
Okay.
It's about our first aircraft carrier landing, and my buddies in my cohort. There are a dozen of us, and we all felt this. Well, one funny thing about it is, and I don't know why, before the launch and doing roll call, one of the officers also asked us for a birth date. So gallows humor being what it is about guys saying they want to make sure when we crash and burn that they have the right date on our tombstone. Well, that just added to more fuel to the fright. But anyway, I think there was a record number of flushes in the men's toilet in the half hour before we launched to go out for our first landing. We'd been indoctrinated as we are in any military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. When you do something dangerous, the coach or whoever the officer is in charge will usually come up with a story that scares everybody enough that they pay attention. And we'd seen enough death and destruction in videos, including an F-8 Crusader that broke in half when it hit the back of the ship, and the cockpit is tumbling by. The videographer with you can see this pilot still inside they're tumbling down when we'd seen enough of that, that's why we were scared. But no, I did not crap my pants.
Just curious, because that's an expression we hear colloquially on the streets, and I was just wondering if that ever happens in real life. But I guess it's it's something that you harness the fear, and you maybe you feel the adrenaline rush after it's already passed through you, after the danger is gone. Then you're exhausted, and you just want to deal with all that that's coursing through your bloodstream, right? I've heard also people that go through trauma, it doesn't hit them till later. Is that something you've experienced?
I would say in order to be successful as a Navy fighter pilot or anybody landing on an aircraft carrier, that's the goal for flying commercial to anybody who's a pilot in charge of all those people, or whether or not you're landing aboard an aircraft carrier. You've got to have ice water in your veins. You cannot let the fear get to you. And those who do let the fear get to them usually wash out before they get to that point. But yes, then I go down to my stateroom after a bad night at the carrier and say, "Holy cats, that was, we could have died." Then you feel the fear afterwards when it's safe to do so.
Yeah. I'm wondering what you think about original sin and all the thistles and thorns and disease and death and war. Do you have a different perspective on war because you're Christian, because you're Catholic?
Absolutely. And that was the part of the story that I didn't go into yet. But I spent 20 years meeting the minimum qualifications to become an astronaut. And I successfully got through test pilot school, which is very hard to get into, and got the top assignment in the Navy. I could say top assignment in the world. I was to be the first fighter pilot to fly the F-18 Hornet. And if it had been to test it to land aboard aircraft carriers or test it in dogfighting, I would not give it in a second thought. But it was to test it to drop weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. And that's where my Catholic faith really kicked in. I said, how can I do this? How can I do this? I went to my family priest. I went to the chaplain, Catholic chaplain, and they introduced me to the concept of just war. And as you probably know, just war has to be the last means, has to be legitimate. Government has to be limited and proportional. And it cannot be against innocent civilians. But weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, biological, chemical weapons, they're all about killing massive numbers of people. So as a Catholic, how could I do that? So that was what I faced. 20 years I got to that point in. And the story then tells how did the Navy react to that and what happened to me. But I'll leave that for the rest book.
Wow. I'm gonna have to add your book to my reading list, even though my reading list is bloated and constipated already. But I'm gonna have to add your book.
Your job, I would bet it is.
How many pages is your book? Just out of curiosity, 300 or
730.
Oh my God.
So they made the decision, David, just this week to split it into 2 volumes.
Oh, okay. Volume 1, Volume 2, or they have just separate titles, separate subtitles?
That hasn't been decided yet.
Wow. Very cool. Wow, I can't wait to read it. I love stories. It's funny that you're in the Navy because I love stories about the sea, travel by sea across the ocean, and St. Paul was shipwrecked famously, and for some reason those stories really grab me more so than the air flight or space or whatever. It's something about being on the water. It's really scary. Have you had? I don't want to try to like trigger you with memories of bad stuff that happened, but were you ever in a situation where you were actually on a boat, whether it was an aircraft carrier or a submarine or anything like that, where you felt like there was a danger either from wildlife, sharks, whales, whatever, or just from the weather? Usually it's the weather that gets you, right, when you're on a craft.
David, we should probably tell the audience that I did not pay you to come up with these questions. But that's perfect timing.
Okay.
By the way, David, I did survive a Category 5 hurricane, typhoon as they call it, in the Western Pacific, summer of 1970. And one big part of one chapter is about how that happened. But weather forecasting was not obviously as good as it was. And this hurricane developed in 3 days from tropical storm to hurricane. It's called Hurricane Olga. And it got up to 165 miles an hour. And we were out to sea at the time. We weren't in the middle of it, but we were close enough that it just kicked the crap out of us. And I was just a summer intern, as you'd say in civilian terms. My summer cruise before my senior year at the Naval Academy. And I was supposed to be trained to be junior officer of the deck, but the weather was so bad that they told us we needed to strap into our beds, our racks. And they gave us straps to do that because the ship was going 30 degrees left, 30 degrees right. And I went up to the bridge to see for myself and asked them. And by then it was going to 45 degrees left, 45 degrees right. I said, how far can we tip over without going under? And the officer of the deck said, I don't know. And if you've ever seen the movie The Perfect Storm, here we are in a valley and with water troughs, mountains of water surrounding us. It was scary as hell. So I went back to my stateroom, I strapped myself in, and I said, it does no good to worry about it. God's going to take care of us. And I slept like a baby that night. Woke up the next morning, the sun is out and the seas are calm. I go back up to the bridge again. Same officer of the deck is there. I said, well, what was the answer to my question? How far could we go? He said, we went to 60 degrees port at one point and didn't capsize. But he said, boy, we were hanging on for our dear lives. What happened to the ship? Well, all 336 of us lived through it, obviously. But the ship surface was destroyed. The mast was gone, the communications were gone, the big 5-inch guns, which weighed tons, were plucked out and tossed to the bottom of the sea. And I considered an act of God that he was telling us something during the Vietnam War, that he'd save us human beings, but not the fighting capability of that destroyer.
Oh. Have you ever been swallowed by a whale? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But if you said yes, I would believe you at this point. I would believe you. I like the story of Jonah, the story of Jonah.
Yes.
it's his attitude is funny because he's reluctant. He's a very reluctant prophet, and he's complaining. And God asks him at one point, "Are you angry, Jonah?" And he says, "Yeah, I'm angry enough to die." Like he was so angry, because the people of Nineveh repented. And so, it's just funny, the human nature that we have. Um, we're prone to complain, and I'm just wondering if complainers get weeded out of the military, or if some complainers make it through, and they still carry with them this propensity for whinging and moaning and complaining all the time. Is that something you see even in the military?
No, at least among the aviators, they wash out pretty early in the program. By the time you get to where you have to fight, where you have to survive, you got a pretty tough bunch there. And not that they don't complain about some things, but they aren't. My experience with them is they're not whiners. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good slogan for the U.S. military. Not whiners. So, you know, um, Pope Francis, he's a controversial figure. I happen to like him, but he's a very controversial figure. But one of the things he did early in his pontificate was he put up a big sign on his office door that said "No complaining allowed." Right. So, because I think that the evil one, the serpent, the devil, he likes to work through that sort of psychology of complaining. Instead of taking action and proposing solutions, just be critical and say, well, I would have done it differently. And this is, ironically, this is what Pope Francis's pontificate has been all about. And you yourself may question some of the decisions that he's made or the way that he's doing things, but I'm just curious what your perspective is on all the negativity that surrounds Pope Francis and his pontificate in the headlines, online, on the I don't know if you spend time on the internet, but it's very toxic in the Catholic community online. A lot of people Pope bashing, putting down the Vicar of Christ, and these sorts of things. I'm just wondering what your attitude is towards that side of Pope Francis's pontificate, the complaining and the criticism. What do you think about all that?
I like Pope Francis. I'm a lot older than you are. In my lifetime, he's the first pope, in my opinion. This is my opinion, who really tries to be the Vicar of Christ, tries to live that life and promote that life. So it grieves me to have him criticized by the American far right, for example. And one of my best friends from high school was a classmate of the cardinal, who was relieved of his duties here recently, and he was known to be a whiner back when he was in school.
Yeah. Wow, interesting. You got the inside scoop. Okay.
I have a funny story to tell you, just to lighten things up a bit. It's a Catholic priest, chaplain on board the aircraft carrier. We were on the USS Eisenhower when it was brand new. It was the first billion-dollar boat. Don't get me going on how much weapon systems cost. The Gerald R. Ford, $13 billion. Anyway, he wanted to ride in a back seat. If you're full-time in the Navy and you want to fly in an airplane and there's an available seat, you can do so. But to fly in a jet like the F-4 Phantom, which was the world's fastest fighter at the time, you have to go through a special training on the ejection seat and aerial physiology and so forth. So he did all that training. When it came time to find somebody to fly him, because I regularly went to mass on the aircraft carrier, I was an easy choice. So anyway, I went there, briefed him. He got in the back seat. The plane captain strapped him all in, and we made sure the microphone is hot all the time, so that anybody riding in the back seat doesn't have to fumble around finding the switches. So I taxi up onto the starboard catapult, put the engines full blast, and the whole thing is shuddering as it does in full afterburner. And I salute, and the flight deck officer touches the deck, and it signals the guy in the catwalk to push the button, and boom, off we go. Off the carrier, we accelerate from 0 to 207 miles an hour in 2 seconds. It's just incredible. Smashes the oxygen mask back against his face, and it does eyeball NG. Your eyes blur for that time.
How many
And then,
G is that?
Eyeballs NG.
No, but how many G force are we talking about here? Like,
momentarily about 7.
wow.
Anyway, shoot off there, and what do I hear from the back seat is we're getting screaming down the catapult. Jesus! I hear from the back seat. Of course, that didn't surprise me. Then I stayed low. I cleaned up, took the gear and flaps up, and accelerated in full afterburner near the sea, and then zoomed on up. The Phantom held all the world's records for climb. We rocketed up through 20,000 feet in about 20 seconds. And I hear from the back seat, holy shit. I wasn't expecting that from the chaplain. When we got back and landed, of course, the carrier landing is pretty brutal in itself. There you come down from 167 to 0 in 2 seconds. He didn't say anything until we finally came to rest, and he said, amen. Like a good parishioner, I followed up with an amen.
Wow. Wow.
So that's my Catholic chaplain story for you.
But he was a good man. He was just expressing himself in the moment without forethought, I guess.
Yes, and I haven't named him, so I can't embarrass him.
Well, I don't think there are many of us who could resist the urge to just utter something, you know. If I stub my toe, I end up saying some stuff I regret, you know. So imagine. Wow.
And you can bleep out my
No, it's okay. It's okay. We're pretty loose over here. I have a very small audience anyway, so it's not a big deal. But it's fascinating, you know. It's fascinating thinking about the challenges that you've had to face. And if you don't mind my asking, how old are you today?
75.
Wow, you look great. Are you still? What are you doing to keep healthy and?
Ride a bike, and well, I live half the time in Manhattan and half the time in Montreal.
Oh.
And my wife loves to walk, so we'll do a lot of walking. Do biking, bicycle, do a floor workout, and similar to what I did before. And with Parkinson's, I've got to keep moving. I've got to keep stretching and trying to stay limber so it doesn't incapacitate me.
How long have you had Parkinson's, and which stage are you at in the Parkinson's?
6 years I've had it. I'm still in one of the early stages. Okay. I can still do just about everything that I want to.
Because you keep on top of it, right?
Yes.
And
yes. And I take the medication.
Okay.
The medication is generic, invented back in the 1960s. God bless them. It's pretty darn good.
Good.
Tremor is very little bit, and my balance is good. Those are the two that are the worst.
When's the last time you actually flew? Were piloting?
Just a year ago.
Wow.
And I had a flight scheduled last month, but it got canceled.
What kind of craft are you flying now?
So the Piper Arrow, it's a retractable gear, low wing airplane, top speed about 180 miles an hour.
0 to 180 in 2 seconds, or?
Not anymore.
Wow, amazing. So, what about the sort of rumors that are going around on the internet? You'll have to bear with me for throwing all these silly questions at you, but there's a lot of stuff going around on the internet about the military and experimental injections and medications, and it's just sort of, you get in line and you get jabbed up and you don't even know what you're getting half the time. Is there any truth to the fact that you're guinea pigs for a lot of medications and injections?
I suppose occasionally it could be. I don't have current events, news. I don't have any current way of assessing what's going on. During the Ford administration, we were all required to get flu shots. And I never got the flu before, but I was really sick from the shot. So I refused to take a flu shot again for many years until after I was actually over 70 years old.
Okay.
Actually, with COVID coming, I get the flu shot now. But I'm not, I wouldn't think that anything very exotic would be going on with the military.
Okay. Because they want to take care of their bodies and.
Yes.
How do you keep your mind sharp? Do you have hobbies that are intellectual, or do you just read a lot, or what do you do to keep your mind sharp?
Well, this whole last year, I've devoted 4 to 6 hours a day to writing this book.
Wow.
But I also do Lumosity, which is a website that has brain games of sorts.
I've done that. Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah,
fun. That's fun.
some of those
What's your favorite game on there that you're good at?
choo-choo trains.
Okay, I don't know that one.
Oh, you got to try that one.
Because I
The
played
tra-
years ago. I played when it first came out.
oh,
So they've added obviously. What is the concept with the choo choo trains?
each one is a different color, and it comes out of the mountain, and you have to get it into its station. And they keep coming faster and faster, and all these branches. You got to change, switch tracks, and so forth.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah, that's a lot of fun. It's good to keep sharp. I'm wondering about languages. Have you ever, like, as you visit Montreal, you like Montreal, have you spoken French? Did you speak any Spanish or Italian or any other more exotic languages? Arabic
I,
or
no,
Hebrew
I,
or
no, I learned German along the way, but
okay.
in Montreal, everybody speaks English too, so I haven't felt the need to learn too much.
Just because of
I can read French fairly well. I can usually figure out what is being said, but pronunciations, no,
yeah, I'm in Montreal, right? You know that? I'm living in Montreal. Did you know that?
no, I didn't. I did not know that.
Okay. So, because of that, I think I have license to ask a couple of questions. What are your favorite neighborhoods, some of the landmarks in Montreal that you like? Can you just talk a little bit about it? Have you been to St. Joseph's Oratory, for example?
No, I've not been to St. Joseph's Oratory. We live in Old Port.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, right across the garden from Chateau Ramezay.
Wow, beautiful.
Yes, I love it. I love it, that area. And I'm very
Wow.
close to the bike paths as well.
Yeah.
Um,
You stay close to you don't venture out too far, the stadium, the botanical gardens. You haven't really tasted.
no, we've been there, been to the stadium, been to the botanical gardens, been to the mountain top.
Okay.
Yeah, I love Montreal. I, I prefer to live there than Manhattan.
Do you have cuz it's snowy here. Do you have the same kind of weather in New York as you do in Montreal?
No, no, New York's 20 degrees warmer in the winter time.
No way.
10 degrees warmer in the summer. Yeah. So,
Wow. Why?
so we've got
Why is that?
ocean,
Oh.
Atlantic, nearness to the Atlantic Ocean, and
Oh.
of course, 300 miles farther north too.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. That's a big difference though. That's a very big
It
difference.
is. It is.
Wow. You never thought of going to the south, like Florida or something?
I lived below the Mason-Dixon line for 18 years while I was in the Navy, and it's a nice place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live in Florida.
I want to give a shout out to a couple of my friends. Daniel Drazinovich is here. He's Catholic, a Canadian. And my friend Matt Nugloff, he's another Catholic that lives in the States, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, it's fascinating talking with you. I'm wondering what you think about. I mean, I hate politics, but I just want to get your sort of gut reaction to the way the world's going, because you're older than I am. You've seen stuff, and because you're in the military, you might have some insider information about a little bit higher up in how governments work and geopolitics and people chasing after natural resources. And you mentioned competition with China, so you've got your finger on the pulse way more than I do, because I just ignore politics. I'm just wondering in the context of Christianity, obviously, and the fact that we live in a fallen world, I'm just wondering how you see politics today. Is it different from, for example, the 60s, late 60s? There was sort of a popular movement, sexual revolution, but there was also a peace and love sort of thing. Whatever you might think about that, there was sort of a vibe in the air in the Western world. I'm just wondering, you've seen different eras. What do you think of this era, the 21st century, in terms of politics and the spiritual side that lies behind politics and geopolitics?
Well, I'm not much of a politician. I do keep up with current events, but it's aggravating times. I try to stay positive and believe that it's all going to work out. but Ukraine and Russia, and Israelis and Palestinians, very stressing, and makes me think about just war
Yeah.
on both sides, and protecting innocent civilians.
Yeah. That's the tragedy always. That's the tragedy always. But, when it comes to mammon, worshiping money, I'm just wondering if you can sort of give me some feedback. Have you seen firsthand that a lot of people and governments and corporations are corrupt in the sense that they put resources or money or whatever you want to call it above the welfare of their fellow human beings? Is that something you've seen firsthand, or are you like me, you just sort of sit back and speculate about how much corruption there might be in governments and NGOs and stuff like that?
Well, at the employee level, we didn't talk about my post-Navy time, but I spent 27 years in energy conservation businesses, in my last 13 years as a management consultant, and got into companies that one would name, like Standard & Poor's, McGraw-Hill, Pfizer, Daiichi Sankyo. And at the employee level, I saw no corruption at all. I could only suppose at the higher levels there may have been some, but mostly it was good professional people doing their job day to day with a pretty good sense of what's right and wrong.
Yeah.
So I don't
Yeah.
have anything to.
Yeah. It's it is a tricky time we're living in. I'm sure you're familiar with Romans 11. I always ask my guests about this recently. Romans 11 is always one of my favorites anyway, but since things are heating up in the Middle East, I thought I'd ask you, and I've asked my recent guests about Israel and sort of the biblical sort of prophecies about Israel and the formation of the state of Israel recently in the 40s. And of course, the displacement and treatment of the people of Palestine, or whatever you want to call them. I publicly admit that I'm against the formation of the state, and I'm against Zionism, and I cheer for the underdog. So I feel bad for the displaced Palestinians and the mistreatment of the Palestinians. But I could be wrong. I might be misinformed. I'm just wondering what your take is, given the fact that, that we're told in the Bible that the Jews were the chosen people, and they're going to come back to Zion. So there is a true type of Zionism. I just think that the current day Zionism is a political thing. It's not the true Zionism. And there are some Jews today who are outspoken against Zionism, and they say, no, we're supposed to be in exile now, and God will bring us back when it's the right time. So I'm just wondering, as a Christian, how you read Romans 11. The Jews are going to come back in at the end. Is this the end times? Did the politicians force God's hand by creating the state of Israel when they did? Are the Palestinian people mistreated? Is it a prison compound? What are your opinions on all that? It's complicated stuff. I know it's delicate. It's a big topic, a lot of layers, but just give me your hunch.
I really don't have.
No?
I don't have an opinion on it.
No?
No, I'm stressed by the war going on, and I'm reminded of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Wasn't that supposed to be proportionality?
Yeah. Even that is better than what we've got, right?
Yes.
So it seems like you're sympathetic to my take, which is that the solution. A lot of people ask me when I complain about the situation, they say, "Well, what's the solution? What's the solution?" And my answer is, Jesus Christ is the solution, right? Like the Jews, they prophesied the Messiah, then many of them denied their own Messiah when he came. So the answer is for the Jews to accept their Messiah, and the answer for the Muslims is that Jesus is not just a prophet, one prophet among many. He's God incarnate. So the answer for the Muslims is Jesus, fully God, fully man. He's the Messiah. He's the Jewish Messiah, So a lot of the problems can be resolved. All of the problems can be resolved by choosing life, and Jesus Christ is the only way, the only truth, and the only life. So I'll just let you add any comment you have to that. I'm sure you agree with me.
Well, love is the strongest strongest power in the universe. And Jesus was pretty clear when he said, love your enemies, do good things to those who despise you, turn the other cheek. I don't see that happening anytime soon in the warring factions, but that's, to me, where it ends. When somebody says, I forgive you.
Yeah. It's old news now. It's old news now, but there was a big conflict between Catholics and Protestants in Northern Ireland. And I mean, it's sort of sad commentary when we look at Ireland today. They seem to have watered down the faith or lost the faith, or they're really losing it, pro-abortion, all these sorts of things. When it comes to Catholics and non-Catholic Christians and unity, ecumenism, Vatican II has some very beautiful things to say about that. And Pope Francis obviously is the Vicar of Christ, and he's working for Christian unity. I'm just wondering what you would say about ecumenism, and how can we all get together, because that's what Christ wants. He wants us to be united, right? So another huge question. I'm sorry to give you these difficult questions, but what would you say?
I don't have an answer. I just don't.
But you see the disunity everywhere among Christians, right? You see it.
Yes, but I don't have a solution to it, if that's your question.
Yeah. The solution, well, I mean, for example, I'm married to a culturally Greek Orthodox woman, and she hates the Catholic Church. Have you dealt with anti-Catholicism? I mean, some of the grievances are legitimate, some aren't. There are a lot of lies that are made up about the Catholic Church. How do you deal with that, or have you not been subject to prejudice because you're Catholic?
I was subjected to prejudice when I was Catholic in rural Wisconsin. We were outnumbered 9-1 by Protestants.
Oh yeah.
But it was, and when John Kennedy was running for president, they said, you're electing the Pope for president. You probably heard that before. But no, it was never bitter.
Okay.
No.
It was never personal. It was never a personal thing. It was more of an abstraction for.
Well, at the Naval Academy, we were required to go to Mass. Catholics and Protestants were required to go to church on Sunday.
Okay.
That changed by a Supreme Court ruling after I left. But I can say that when I was anguished over the decision to continue on my professional path or turn away from weapons of mass destruction, and I was surrounded by Catholics who were Naval Academy graduates who also went to church every day, prayed before meals, said the same prayers that I did. Yeah, and I began to think that it was pretty much lip service when it came to their career, because they wouldn't turn down an assignment like I did.
Yeah, that's like when Jesus met that good young man who had, led a perfect life, and he said, "Well, there's one more thing you can do if you want to be perfect: give away everything you have to the poor." And he went away feeling sad. That's kind of what you had to deal with, but you were willing to make a principled stand and make a sacrifice. One of my friends in the live chat asked if it's actually possible today, with today's weaponry and technology, if it's even possible in theory to ever have a just war. I don't think it is possible. Maybe, but I don't think I've ever seen one. What do you say about that?
I agree with you. No, my priest, Father Crowley, from my childhood, was in World War II aboard a ship. He was in the Navy as an enlisted man. He considered World War II a just war. And in some regards, it meets a lot of the requirements. But in the end, everybody ends up bombing innocent civilians. And today, the weapons are even more destructive. So I think you're right. I don't know that there is such a thing as a just war.
So it's I'm going to wrap up here, and I appreciate you taking the time. I pushed a little bit further than what you wanted to with your voice, but I'm just wondering. This is another delicate question. Forgive me, but how are you preparing for death? Because you're probably only going to live another 20, 30 years. How are you preparing for to meet your maker? What do you do? Do you think about judgment? Do you have you done a general confession recently where you're sort of trying to make sure that you've been absolved of all your sins? What are you doing?
What am I doing to prepare for death?
Yeah. Are you ready? Are you ready? You feel like you're ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I've come to believe in reincarnation, so I think the Catholic purgatory is reincarnation.
Oh, really?
And it's an evolution of the soul. So I feel like I'm still evolving.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm glad I asked. Because
Yeah.
otherwise I never would have known. Do you have other unorthodox beliefs?
Reincarnation is pretty orthodox outside of Catholics.
Yeah. I'm talking like within the bounds of what the church teaches, within those bounds. You got some other unorthodox beliefs? I mean, you're free to believe what you want, but just curious, you don't believe in an eternal hell or?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
I believe in the body of Christ and that we're all connected. And we're all part of the same whole.
Okay. Do you believe? Well, I'll have to have you back to talk more to you about this sort of stuff. But do you do you believe in the Trinity? Do you think that God is?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
You do believe in the Trinity. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we're connected with one another through the Holy Spirit.
Okay. Fascinating. Wow. So it's been a real pleasure meeting you. I hope you come back, because now I've got a whole bunch more questions. But if you're up to it in 2024, I'll have you back, and we'll chat some more about your beliefs, because it sounds like you've explored maybe some Eastern ideas, Eastern philosophy, Hinduism, Buddhism. I got a lot of questions.
Buddhism.
Okay.
Buddhism.
Yes. Okay. I got a lot of questions. I'm very interested in all that. But thank you for taking the time. If I don't know what your prayer life is like, but if you want to add me and mine to your prayers, that would be nice. I'd appreciate that. And I enroll all my guests in a perpetual mass. So you and your family are going to be getting the graces of the mass every day. Even if you end up in purgatory, I know you don't believe in purgatory, but if you end up there, this perpetual mass will help. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, David. I will remember you in my prayers as well.
I appreciate that. I'm sure you have 100 more stories for me about the military and everything else, and I'm hoping to hear a couple of them if you come back in the new year. But have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. It's been a pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure meeting you, David.
God bless you. God bless you.
God bless.
Talk soon. Bye-bye.